I want to help you on that path, so I'm going to offer you this.
Thank you.
Now, be careful how you open it.
Is it black strap molasses or normal?
Nothing is what it says on the label with me. And
It's
did
not
you
molasses,
hear
is
that
it?
sound?
The G shit
No,
is
careful,
it's oh fuck.
Careful.
Hello, welcome to podcast 17. We've got that far. I'm wearing a shirt that needs ironing. Today I'm joining. I'm not joining. Is he? I don't know what I'm saying. I've had too much water. I'm with Keith Robinson, Shaman, Mystic, and all-round top geezer. We're just going to be discussing spirituality, plant medicine, and all things around that kind of region, really. So, good evening, Keith.
Thank you very much, Jim. I'm really glad to be here.
No, I'm glad you've come here, kind of thing. So, how did you set about on the journey to become a shaman? What is that? Is that too big of a question to start?
No, it's an excellent question to start off. Yeah, how do you become a shaman? Well, the first thing is you'll probably have a lot of really challenging, what ordinary people would call unpleasant experiences. That really helps, because in a sense, in order to be a shaman, the first thing that needs to happen is you need to be given a bloody good shaking. You've got to be shaken out of your comfort zones and be prepared to entertain the difficult, the unusual, the strange. Because of course the first thing that happens when you're qualified, you get your clients coming to you, and I would say this is broadly the situation. People come for issues about health, issues about finances, issues about relationship, and issues about work. That's the four things. When I was trained, we were told it's health, finances, relationships, and work, and that covers pretty much all the things that people ever ask you. Although it might seem they're asking you a very high-fluting question about the deep, cosmic, whatever, it usually ends up with that kind of a level. And it means I've encountered people who have had experiences and difficulties, and they've tried everything else. Yeah. And having tried all these other things, they think, well, I've got nothing to lose, I might as well go and see a shaman. Yeah. And that's how they come to me. So how I became a shaman really was, first of all, there's two kinds. There's the shamans, which I call the exoteric cell, and they're the ones that do the ceremonies out in the world. Okay. And then there's what I call more the interior stuff, that's doing the healing. And I started off as an exoteric shaman, absolutely, because it is weddings, puberty ceremonies, deaths, and big spectacular fire shows. Okay. Now a lot of people don't know about fire shows, but a fire show is a ritual theatre experience in the field, and I did that for a total of 17 years. What happens, I went to Glastonbury Festival in 1992, and I went up to the fields at the top, what they call the green fields, and this guy was doing this fire show, and I took one look at what he was doing, and I saw the way everyone's attention was galvanised, because he just set this field on fire. There's a labyrinth, there's things going on here, there's things going on, and I'm thinking, that's amazing. I want to do that. Okay. So 6 weeks later, I found myself in a camp, which I'd been just 1 year previously. I said, I want to do a fire show. Everyone, all right, yeah, do a fire show. So I did my own little fire show. Well, they got bigger, and ended up doing massive ones, even like in the city, Leicester City Centre, I did one, all sorts of places. And what it does, this is my thing I want to share with you. Everybody knows about the element of earth because we walk on the earth. We all know about the element of water because we drink it or we bathe in it. We know about the element of air because we breathe it. But the element that's missing in the lives of everyday people is the element of fire. Right. So to galvanise people and get them waking up by something spectacular with fire, it's a way to really open people up to new possibilities. So I love doing that. So
a fire show, for anybody who's not into spirit, doesn't know what is that is the point of a fire show, is just to introduce people to the element of fire. Am I missing the point here?
You've totally got the point. That's the most important thing. But while you're there, you turn it into what I call a ritual theatre experience. Okay. Which means that you might have a message. So one of the particular fire shows I did, it was all about the moon. We did the waning moon, the dark moon, and the new moon. So just to give you an idea what happened with that one, is a field, and there's all these trails been set out like in a labyrinth, and it's with wood shavings, and I've sprinkled paraffin all over the wood shavings, and I've got a fire torch in my hand, and there's 3 places in the labyrinth, and the first one is a woman who's representing the waning moon. Okay. That's like a woman in later years. Then there's one with the dark moon, you don't really see much about her, and then the one with the new moon, this is a young girl with flowers in the hair, wearing white, and all the people process through the flaming arch into the labyrinth, and they go to the first person, something happens, they get given something, they go to the next one, and they go to the final one, and they get something given to them again, and they go out and they feel like, well, I feel different. So that really sparked my enthusiasm. So I did it for 17 years. It was such good fun.
On your journey, did you have a mentor who was a shaman who took you under his wing, like a Karate Kid Daniel-san, where he'd take you in, or did you kind of pick up the shaman journey on yourself, or did you have somebody under your wing? I'll
tell you my story on that one, right? I've been interested in this for so many years that when I was interested in becoming a shaman, there weren't any, not in this country. There weren't any probably in Europe that anyone was to know about. There was nothing. I came across a book and it was called The Teachings of Don Juan, A Yaqui Way of Knowledge. It was by Carlos Castaneda. So I read his first book and it's about taking plant medicine. Wow, this is, I want to do that. I want to do it now. I want to go to that part of the world. I was living in London, I was on a wage, I couldn't afford it. So the years went by, nothing happened, except he brought out another book. Every book he brought out, I read it. I read all 10 books at that particular point, thought, this is fantastic. Met a woman, got married, settled down, had 2 children, forgot all about it. This is a really classic story that you get to hear so many times, and then finally, something happened.
Right.
And what happened was about the most dramatic thing that could happen, really. My wife died of cancer.
Well, sorry to hear that.
The night she died, this is 2005 to give you a bit of a time frame, the night she died I was sitting on my own in the sitting room of what was her house. My daughter was upstairs, wanted to be left alone. My son was 1.5 miles away in his flat, wanted to be left alone. And I was just sitting there. The phone rang. It was my good friend Amanda, and she said, hey, there's a training to be a shaman. It starts in a month's time. Do you want to do it? Now, one of the things I love about life is when you have that instant yes. I didn't think, there was no thought process going on in this head at all. It was simply yes. Because what have I got to lose? What the hell am I doing with my life? So I did. And literally within 3 months of doing that training, I'd learnt enough that I would have been able to help her with her cancer. But of course I didn't know any of those things at the time, so it was too late for her, but it wasn't too late for other things. And it was a 2-year training. I'm so grateful for my teacher Howard. I trained in London. I didn't go to these fancy places like Peru or wherever. No, I went to London, and we were in, I'll be honest with you, it was in a children's creche. So there's all these pictures on the wall, and A, B, C, and all this crap all around the wall. And that's where we're learning to be shamans. It was great. There's over 20 of us, so we got a lot of opportunity to share with each other, and my life's never been the same since.
So what, on the course, what did it cover, kind of thing? What did you learn, or is it like, how long is a piece of string?
What is it about this man? He knows how to ask the best questions, because the very first thing we learned, we spent the morning learning about confusion. He got us to see that most people are frightened of being confused because people think confusion, dementia, lost me marbles, I'm up shit creek. Not a bit of it. Confusion is the beginning of wisdom, because the way it works is the enemy of confusion, I'll be straight, it's clarity. If you think you know everything about everything, you've got problems. So the very first thing we learned is that when you don't know what the hell's going on, this allows new possibilities to open up. So in the afternoon I did my very first shamanic journey. He's banging on the drum. All 22 of us are all lying on the ground on our little mats, and we've been given a thing we've got to do, and I'm journeying for my partner, and that partner's journeying for me. And we're doing everything he says, and we're getting all the information that comes up in the journey quite naturally. And I write it all down, and I'm thinking, I bet this is a load of crap. How can any of this be true? I don't know this woman from Adam. How do I know this is true? So you can imagine what we did. At the end of the session, we swapped papers, and she read what I'd written, and she was absolutely flabbergasted. And I would say that my 2 years of training was a gradual deconditioning process. I should explain. I originally trained as a microbiologist, so I'm a mainstream scientist background, and I've worked in medical pathology in 2 hospitals in the provinces and in London. So I know about diagnosing diseases because I know about microbiology, because that was my degree. I know so much about what's going on at the moment you wouldn't believe, and generally speaking, people don't really want to know. So there might be a chance to say a few things here.
You can say what you want on this show, Keith.
Well, it'll be fun to get to that point later, but yeah. It's been a journey, definitely.
So, on this course, was there much plant medicine? Well, is that where you started your plant medicine?
Good point. We did absolutely not. So the whole of the 2 years training is about the drum. He's doing the drum and you're journeying, you're getting information, and that starts to become the healing that you do for people. And that information, when they hear it, it changes their lives because they get new understanding. And when you start doing any particular illnesses and conditions, that's when the magic really starts to happen. So that's what I was in the middle of saying, and I lost my own thread. I've brought it back to myself. The 2 years was to decondition myself from thinking that what I was doing lying on this mat wasn't a load of cobblers, but actually every single time I did it, I was getting something valuable. So it smashed my scientific viewpoint of, well, it can't be true because it's not logical. I don't see how my rational mind's involved. No, so that I was forced into it, and we all were really. It's amazing how we chose to do this thing that we then doubted, rubbished, and then got convinced of the absolute truth of the veracity of it, really. So back to your question about plant medicines, the whole 2 years was done without anything to do with plant medicines. However, on one afternoon, he took us up to Hampstead Heath, and we walked around really slowly, and we got to tune into these plants. I'm talking about normal plants you might find in a park, like a fuchsia or an ash tree. So there's nothing like what you're talking about now. But at the end of the training, he said to us, if anyone would like to come and do a retreat with me with ayahuasca in November, that's just a few weeks after you finish training, you're most welcome. So I think pretty much every single one of us said, right, we're on. And so we did, and that was, as you can imagine, an utterly extraordinary experience, one which I will never forget. And I can remember being taken to a particular location, and as soon as I start to talk about it in words, I'm there. The studio's gone, you're not there, and I'm just in it. So I'm on this concrete slab, and I'm held down by the wrists and the ankles, and I'm lying on my front, and something's about to happen. And it involves a metal object, and it's not very nice. Now, let me give you the gist about the power of the plant medicine. Because I'd done 2 years training, that medicine knew, okay, I'm not going to be easy with this one. I'm going to show this one exactly where he's living, so he can deal with his stuff from the deep, distant past he needs to deal with. What that plant medicine was revealing to me is that actually something happened to me when I was 10 years old. I experienced ritualistic satanic sexual abuse from age 10 to age 11. And the way I know it finished at age 11 is I moved to a different part of the country, so all the connections got cut. So I have been in the whole world of what people are talking about now. I've spent most of my life in the understanding that most people couldn't cope with even hearing about it. And when what happened to me in the 1990s, women would start to come to me and talk about what happened to them, I realised the only reason these women are telling me about well, they got raped and they got abused and they got this and they got that is they knew I was a safe man to talk about, because I knew the territory.
I never knew that. That's quite shocking to me. I never knew that had happened to you. I'm
really glad you didn't, because we're live, we're going for it, aren't we? So this is it.
That's the point, yeah.
So what the medicine was showing me is showing me that was such a deep experience. Now, what I'd done, what most people do, but not everybody, because of the ages, between age of 10 and age 11, that's still pretty young. The younger you are, not definitely, but the more likely you're going to shut it all off. So I must have created a wall around that, and it didn't exist. And I went through my life until about age 38. Age 38, I came up with a chronic illness. And that illness lasted for 10 years. So for 10 years, I wasn't able to get a job. I lost my job. I lost my family. I lost my home. I lost my marriage. I lost everything. Got divorced. I found myself living 160 miles away in a housing project for homeless people. And that's where my shamanic journey went from, okay, so we're preparing him to be a shaman. He's having all these difficult experiences in his life. Now we're going to really hit him with one. Boom. That was it. So when I lost everything, that caused me to be ready to embrace all sorts of experiences in life, which is what happened.
Do you think the universe kind of throws things at us and signs and things that I'm just asking you for the people at home. I kind of believe in signs. I don't really follow them when I should, kind of thing, like, you know what I mean. But do you believe it? That's basically, I'm just asking you what you've just said, really. Innit?
In shamanism, we have a word, and the word is an omen.
Yeah.
There are omens. There was an omen yesterday, actually, after the dance. There was a whole flock of these birds that flew across funnily enough, where I was dancing, it was in Ormskirk. Did you know there's an octagon in Ormskirk?
No,
Well, I didn't
no,
yesterday afternoon. It was
no.
an octagon, same size, same shape, same everything pretty much. And I came out from the dance and these flock of birds flew over, and it was just like a validation about we'd all done this wonderful cleansing. We connected with the heart in community. It was wonderful. So I certainly recognise omens. I've made one film about omens, and I will make more in the future because it's a really important subject. What I'd say to anyone is if you get an omen and you don't pay attention to it, well, just give yourself a good slap on the wrist because they're there for a reason.
Yeah.
So to answer your question, what I would say is that we all get incarnated into this life, and some of us choose to go in the slow lane of the motorway, and we get our 2.4 children, we get a mortgage, we get a car, we wash it on a Sunday morning, and nothing much really happens to us. We have an okay childhood.
Yeah.
You get people in the middle lane, and they're tearing along about 70 miles an hour, and then you get some that are in the outside lane. My entire life has been lived in the outside lane as far as I'm concerned, because I've had experience after experience after experience. And in a way, the satanic sexual abuse wasn't the most severe thing. To be really, the first year of my life was more severe than that. And then the death of my wife from cancer was also such a big one. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. I've had so many severe experiences, and they've literally, what they've done is this. I didn't understand any of these things at the time. So at the time, something happens. Why has that happened? But then finally, when I was doing the training, I thought, someone can come to me with a problem and they could have experienced absolutely anything. They could have been tortured, they could have been this, they could have been that. I can handle it because I've been through something like that myself. I'm not going to run away. I'm going to sit and listen to you. I'm going to help you with whatever you've got because I can't get freaked out.
So, going to come back to abuse, was your parents party to this abuse? I'm sorry, is that too deep?
No, it's a beautiful question. I love it. Okay, what you've got to do is stop criticising yourself for your questions because they're all gold. They're all
Thank you very much,
pure
Pete.
gold, these questions. I'm just grateful to have the chance to be able to say these things.
You're welcome to Palletwood Studios. It's the magic. It's this free speech here. If it throws off
Absolutely.
YouTube, we'll go on Bitchute and all them other channels. We're on brand YouTube too as well. Anyway.
Yeah, brand YouTube is something I'm very interested in exploring for myself, actually.
And
So I've
it's
taken
really
note
easy.
of that.
All you do is copy the URL and that's it, and your video and all your information goes over.
And it
Anyway.
goes straight over there. Well, it couldn't be easier. Fantastic. Right, so please.
We were talking about, like, I asked the question, was your
my
parents party to
parents.
this?
Right. It took me so many years to understand this. And really, the year my wife died in 2005, a few months later, I started to do something called primal therapy. So at the same time as I'm trained to be a shaman, I'm actually doing primal therapy. This is one of the most full-on therapies there are that I know of, based on Dr. Arthur Yanov's work, and you get to go to the really difficult places. And I did a year's work one-to-one with a therapist, and I did group work with a whole group of people in a room with padded walls, and I kid you not, and everything kicks off in there. And this is what I discovered, that plus my shamanic work and doing all the journeys for myself to try to understand, okay, who are you? Why has your life been like it has? And this is what I've pieced all these things together. You can imagine how long it took to piece these things together. So what I now understand is that my parents were what I would call in the very lowest of the levels of what we call the dodgy stuff. Really the lowest possible levels. They didn't have any idea what they were doing at all. And it particularly came out on one of the therapy sessions with my primal therapist, because she helped me to understand that actually my mother, I can say this, God rest her soul, because she's no longer in the physical body. She died this year. She died in 26th of February this year. She knows I love her, and I know she loves me, so I can say this because that was the soul contract that she'd agreed to with me. So she actually permitted Something's happened. She didn't know what it was. She had no idea what it was. She was simply, it's all right for your lad to do this, isn't it? So I went off. So a little bit like Teal Swan. A lot of people don't understand this. A lot of people think, well, if you've experienced satanic ritualistic sexual abuse, then they must have kidnapped you and you must have lived for years with someone, and that happens. But a lot of them, the majority of them, they just take them off for the day or for the weekend. It's very easy to do. They do whatever they want to them. They bring them back home at the end of it. And she did admit years and years later that I did suddenly undergo a complete personality change. I was a happy kid playing, and all of a sudden I never smiled and life became very serious. And I used to do things which I'm, really ashamed of. For example, if you're a male, this is obvious. If you're a female, there's two possibilities. If you're a male, the sexual abuse is going to involve anal. So that's what it was in my case. I would have an issue about underpants, and I didn't know what to do with them. How can I tell my mother I've just sold my underpants? I used to stuff them in a suitcase.
All right, yeah.
And hide them away, so I wouldn't have to confront my mother with what had happened. So, yeah, it's a difficult subject to talk about, but what I would say to conclude is they didn't really know what was going on. They were so low level, and the people that did what they did, this is going to make a lot more sense as we go on, you can imagine. Their faces were not visible. Right. Their faces and actually their heads were covered, and this is normal for people who work. You can't really call it work, but people who do that stuff. They don't want to be seen. And so when I was in Tenerife, not long ago, this year, only a matter of a few weeks ago, when I walked into the town centre and I saw these people with their masks on their faces, that didn't sit very well with me.
No.
And it made me feel sick, actually.
I asked John Wedger last week, and I said, do you think this mask thing is a satanic ritual? And they did the 2 metre, 2 metre, 2 metre, 6, 6, 6, and all this kind of thing.
It's all... What we are doing is we are just skating across the surface of the marble of something which is so vast. This is why I want to conclude by saying, for many, many millennia, the majority of what I could call the proletariat, the average people have been cherry-picked. Now I know, and I'm sure many of the viewers will know, blonde hair and blue eyes, that's what I had at that age. That's what they wanted. They wanted blonde hair, blue eyes, doesn't matter what the gender was. My brother had green eyes and dark hair. He was not selected. I was. It's as simple as that. It's to do with the bloodlines, to do with the things they get up to. Androsterone, I think there's all sorts of weird things that they do. But yeah, that's why it is the way it is. So back to shamanism. It was many, many years later when I was in this camp, which I helped to run. It was a wonderful camp. We used to have up to 200 people. We'd have them for 6 weeks. We were all volunteers. None of us got paid a penny. We did it because we loved to do this, and we did it for environmental organisations and people who are working for social change. So they got a wonderful service of a wonderful camp. Well, in this camp there was a woman. She came up to me and she offered me healing. I'd done some shamanic healing with her before, and she said, I'll do some Brandon-based journeying for you if you like. And I said, I'm only going to say yes, of course.
Brandon-based journeying? Brandon-based
journeying. So I do shamanic journeying, but there's many other forms. There's quantum healing, there's Brandon-based journeying, there's infinite forms. In my personal opinion, they're all based upon shamanic practice, really. But what she did is she took me through this journey, and she enabled me to understand, and this is perhaps the crux of my entire presentation, these people that did what they did to me as a child, it was organised before I was born. And not on a personal level, not on an ego level, but on a soul level, I chose to incarnate into a physical body and experience things as a child so that I would then be able to take what I have to take as a shamanic practitioner and to do the work I can do. So it's a gift. And this is my big teaching, really, is that all the really worst things that happens to a person, like I got kicked out of university for boycotting my exams and for occupying the arts block. Now that didn't seem like a very good thing at the time. It was a massive gift. I went to a different university, and rather than doing the general course I was going to do, I did microbiology, which is a really useful thing to know about, especially in 2020. So it's a gift. It really is. Whatever awful thing happens to you, death of my wife, another gift. Death of my mother, another gift. Death of my father, another gift. Death of my sister. They're all gifts in disguise.
I have to tell you a story. It was stuck with me. I read it in a book.
Yeah.
It was in a Taoist book.
Yeah.
A farmer has a horse, and he needs this horse to plough his fields and tend his lands.
Yeah.
And his horse bolts. The farmer's friend finds out about this.
Yeah.
Comes round to console the farmer.
Yeah.
All the farmer can say is, "Who knows what is good? Who knows what is bad?" The following day, the horse returns with a lot of wild horses it's befriended. Once again, the farmer's friend comes round, this time to congratulate him. Once again, the farmer just says, "Who knows what is good? Who knows what is bad?"
Yeah.
The following day, the farmer's son tries to ride one of the wild horses. It throws him off and breaks his leg. The farmer's friend must be a nosy fucker. He comes round again and says, "Who knows what is good? Who knows what is bad?"
Yes.
The following day, the army come round looking for conscripts, young men to fight in the war, but because his leg's broken, he's out of the
free.
picture. So that story's always stuck with me, that in life the good things don't necessarily lead to good consequences. No, the bad ones don't. It's a cycle. It's a wheel, innit, basically, and it's just
a cycle. And to me, the gift is to understand. I mean, I said it in my book, Sex Magic, which I wrote, and this is it. Someone asked me, "So you went through that stuff as a child, so I want to know, how do you feel about relationships now?" And I said, "I'm grateful for all my experiences." And this is what I learned from what I call the brown medicine. There was one day I organised a retreat and no one turned up.
Really?
Best thing that ever happened to me. No one turned up. So I'm in my house in Accrington, for those who don't know. And I'm thinking, right, well, I'm ready. They haven't shown. I won't go to the opt-in. I did that retreat for myself, and I had some truly extraordinary experiences, quite a lot of which involved clutching the toilet bowl and going into awareness of clutching the toilet bowl to, there's no toilet bowl, there's no room, there's no me, I'm somewhere completely different. And then back again, out and back, out and back. And at the end of the whole thing, when I was just starting to kind of feel like, I think I can talk, I got the iPad out and I pressed record and I said, "This is what the brown medicine wants to tell you. This is me having an experience. This is you having an experience. This is us having an experience and sharing our experience with you now. And this is all is ever happening." That covers anything that ever happens to you. As Jimmy says, you never know what gift there could be in that experience.
Yeah.
So we need to treasure our experiences, even if it means you've waited 2 hours for the bus and it's snowing and you're totally pissed off.
It's so hard to be in the moment and be now, and basically because people are always saying, "Oh, when I get that car, I'll be happy," or "If she goes out with me, I'll be happy," or people are in the past, rather there or there, we're never here. You know what I mean? And then whenever you get what you desire, it's all right for a week or something, and then it's the next thing, and it's a constant. It's like Alan Watts said or something. It's about like somebody, the cat in a corridor, is going, "Here, kitty, kitty," and it's the next thing all the time. Like,
yes.
It's so hard to live in the moment. Have you any kind of wisdoms to impart on people about the moment?
Okay, I've got my skin, I've got my 2 nails, I'm now pinching my skin and it hurts. That's bringing me in the present moment.
Yeah.
There's a dog barking at my foot. That's bringing me in the present moment. There's a dog licking me arm. I'm in the present moment. Animals are great. Children are great. Babies are fantastic. One of the most wonderful things about being a parent, in my opinion, is you're constantly forced into the present moment.
Yeah.
I've got to change the nappy. I've got to do this. I've got to do that. It keeps on bringing us back. And again, the plant medicines. Because if you wander off with the plant medicines, then you get a bit of a slapping.
Yeah. You know what? I really kind of feel cheated of ayahuasca. No, not by anything anybody else had done.
Go
but
on.
Everybody had these magical awakenings and they met God and people. And I went, I'll just tell it a story because I did enjoy the experience on the whole. And, you know, we're in Wigan now, and like ayahuasca's not really kind of a well-known thing, you know.
Yeah.
And I told my mates I'm going to take in ayahuasca, and they said, "Oh, it's probably one of them places where you get bummed." You know what I mean? And like, so you know, and I was thinking, fucking hell, what am I going? Because I'm from Wigan. And you think, "Oh, you going?"
So this is before you went.
Yeah, well, yeah. Obviously, not after. I knew I didn't know it happened to me, but you know, my mate Stephen Singleton dropped me off, and he were waiting because he said, "If you're nervous and that, because I went up to your house to this dirt track on the Octagon kind of thing, and then and I met all these people, and I thought, well, they call nice people." And that big lad turned up with a skinhead, a
Yeah.
bald head, and that fucking
Yeah.
hell. Hope he's not going to go psycho on ayahuasca, because you read it Daily Mirror, some people go stabbing people on it and shit like that. And on my first night, I had the 3 shots of ayahuasca. Now, Alan Burton was rolling round on the fucking floor for 5 hours, shouting, "Get out now, get from,"
You are banished.
on repeat.
On repeat.
And like, everybody's off their heads like that, and I'm there sat on couch with toothache. I'm thinking, what the fuck is this? You know what I mean? Nothing against. I just thought it mustn't have affected me that kind of much, but everybody else is like meeting pixies and shit. And then the second night I went, and the first 2 shots did nothing for me, and the third shot, bang! I just went, and I saw all this like Native American imagery scrolling past me. I saw like a red and yellow dragon. Was it like a serpent thing and a black dragon float past me? And you know, I remember you saying it's your DNA switching on kind of thing. And there was a really beautiful song on it. Everybody was dancing, and I thought, oh, this is amazing. This is so beautiful. The song changed to something jagged and dark, and from that it turned to heaven to hell, and my senses were overloaded. When I shut my eyes, there was too much going on, and there was a lot going on in the room. Then my ears started ringing, and I ran outside to you. And I was like, and I said to Neil, there's a film called Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, and they take acid.
I've read the book.
And like the Johnny Depp thing, and I looked at Neil, and I looked at me, and Neil's face was like, you know what I mean? And I said to Neil, I goes, I'm not going to die, am I? And he goes, well, you might do. I've died many times on ayahuasca. And I thought, cheers, you know, thanks, Neil. And but you know, I went outside, and you come out with this book, and you was reading spells and shit, but the weird thing what happened was, I just sat quietly on a bench, you know, after when I was bad, and I looked up and said, I'm sorry for my actions, can I be born again? And everything just stopped like that. Now I can't explain that, you know what I mean? Everything just stopped, and it was beautiful, and everything, and I reached a state of like, from all that panic and terror, I was just like in serenity. Yes. And I went back to Wigan in a serene manner, and then life kicks in and something happens, and then you're back to school, you're back in the matrix. But I enjoyed the experience kind of thing. I just feel like, you know, have you ever had a bad trip off it? So, would you not class them as bad trips? Would you just class them as lessons?
It's not. There's no such thing as what you said about the farmer earlier on. That is what it is. So it's all an experience. So everything happens to experience. But what I particularly liked about yours is that there was a change in the music which catapulted you into this challenging state, and then it was that moment of acceptance and saying sorry that brought you right back.
It was mad.
Which is beautiful. It's beautiful.
It was mad.
And that really is the way the plant works. So what we need to do is we need to realise that plants have vast intelligence.
Yeah.
And one of the ways we can grasp this is as follows. So we go into a bit of microbiology here, right? If you go anywhere in the nature, you've got trees and bushes and whatever else, and they've got roots. Now the roots go into the soil obviously, and they penetrate deeply, and the trees particularly. Everyone used to think if an ash tree was 30 foot tall, it would have 30 foot depth of roots. It's not true. It's got about 90 foot, about 3 times. Now every single rooting system has got a fungus called mycorrhiza on it. Now this mycorrhiza is the way that all plants communicate with each other. So if we want to communicate, we have to use these vocal cords. We've got to get everything organised in our heads and get it all to come out. Plants are in a state of incredibly sophisticated communication all the time, and they're basically all connected with each other through their rooting systems. And this is why they've got great wisdom, and they know how far the person can go. Now I've had people who've had much more unsatisfactory experiences than you, and it's funny because one of the first retreats I ever did and the last retreat I ever did were with men on their own, 4 men, 5 men. That's not a good idea. You want at least 1 woman there or more, but if they're all men, what's more likely to happen is they're going to get stuck into their egos, because there aren't any women to kind of affect the atmosphere in a good way. And I can remember the following morning after the first night, and the men turned on me with not a little anger, and were basically complaining and criticising it didn't do anything. So I thought, all right, that's okay. And I went to the car, and I made a big show, got a different medicine out, brewed it all up, did it that night. And the following night, there was only one person that was still stuck in their rational mind. So this is the way it works. If a person takes a lot of plant medicines and nothing happens, it's because they're too frightened to allow it to happen in the first place. Especially that person I'm thinking of, because the first time, none of them got it because they were all in their heads, frankly. The second time, all except for the one really went into it, had extraordinary experiences, but the other one, he was hanging on to the cliff edge by his fingernails. He was not willing to let go. So the bottom line is, if you don't want to let go, it's okay, nothing's going to happen. So if something happens to you, that's really your validation. Actually, you were ready enough. You were ready enough to get what you got, and that was significant.
I'd like to try magic mushrooms. I'm a bit scared of taking ayahuasca again because it was. But you know, I would like to try other things like peyote and stuff. And have you had mescaline? Have you had that kind of stuff?
I've never worked with peyote.
Have you not worked with that one?
I've not. I've worked with tumor, which is actually the same substance, and I've worked with the mushrooms, and I've had actually one of the most extraordinary experiences of my life was with mushrooms.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah, I was in my early 20s, living in London. And a flat with a nice big door, so a bit of space outside the back there. And about an hour later, I'm definitely in the experience, and I've got a stack of computer cards. This shows how long ago it is. It was in the days of when you wanted to program a computer, you had a stack of cardboard cards. So basically, there's a pen and there's a stack of computer cards, and a thought comes into my head, and it's not mine. And it repeats. And I'm getting a bit bored because the thought keeps on repeating. I thought, I know, if I write that thought down, maybe I can have a bit of peace. So I wrote the first one down. Immediately the second one came up. Eventually I had 95 computer cards for the writing. I've got them to this day. I've even taken them to the Octagon and I've shown people. And what I was given there was really a prescription on how to live by the spirits of the mushrooms. And this is so long ago, it's embarrassing. It's years and years and years ago. 20th century that happened to me.
It's mad. I mean, one thing I did learn from that retreat is everything has a spirit.
Everything has a spirit.
When alcohol, spirits.
Absolutely.
And when people get full of whiskey or whatever, that spirit enters them. I think alcohol is like some Arabic word. I'm not sure.
It is. It's Arabic. Yeah.
So is it like soul crushing? I don't know what the exact meaning is, but
I can't remember. But my feeling about alcohol is that there are certain forms in alcohol which does seem to be harmful for people. There are other forms, particularly if you get like a medicinal herb and you imbue the alcohol with a medicinal herb and you drink small amounts of that.
Yeah.
That can be really beneficial.
Yeah, not like £10 a lager and it's at the kebab shop, you know.
It's not quite the same.
They'll invoke a different kind of spirit kind of thing. But
exactly.
Like everything has a spirit, like cocaine and everything you take.
Let me go even further, okay? That's got a spirit.
Really?
Yeah. So there's a car. And the explanation of the iPad, it contains crystals, quartz, it contains metals, it contains other substances, plastics and all the rest of it. So from a shamanic perspective or context, what happens when you've got a phone or an iPad or a device like that? It's made from these raw materials, and these raw materials have been processed with human intention to have what I would call a very simple degree of sentience. They can process zeros and ones, which means I can go on YouTube or whatever. So that has a very, very simple level of I exist. I like to exist. So it's a very simple spirit, nothing like the plants. The plants have got a spirit of such majestic depth and quality we can hardly even talk about in an interview. But yeah, even something like that's got a spirit too.
There is there's a philosophical school that believes, I can't remember the specific philosopher, that even inanimate objects have spirits and kind of experiencing existence kind of thing. Which
is the whole thing.
Which is, for most people, it blows your mind to conceptualize that kind of thing.
But that takes us to a good place, because a good place is, okay, so you're living on the earth, and so am I. Well, what is the earth to you then? Is the earth alive, or is it dead because it's just made of rock? Is that alive? Well, absolutely it is. From a shamanic context and from certain other contexts I could mention, everything has got a degree of sentience. So the concrete blocks, the wood, everything. It's just that the difference between you and me and the wood or the concrete block is what is called Bose-Einstein condensates. We now go into quantum physics. Quantum physics talks about Bose-Einstein condensates. And I don't want to go into detail. If you're interested, you can look it up for yourself. Bose-Einstein condensate. What you'll discover is this is how quantum physicists have been able to understand the origin of consciousness in terms of what we call an organized consciousness. Because the consciousness in the concrete blocks is not organized, but in order to be able to function, for your cells to operate, for you to be able to go to the toilet and to eat food, everything has to be in a level of conscious control, breathing and all the rest of it. So that's what we've got. So all what we call the living things, the plants, the animals, the humans, and the other beings people don't know about, they have got all this going on, and it's literally life. And the other thing just to add is that your DNA and your RNA emits virtual photons. Photons is light. You are a light being in your DNA and your RNA, but also every single one of your hundreds of billions of cells has got a membrane. The membrane also emits virtual photons, which is light. We are light. They say that we are stars. We come from the stars and we are here, and we go to wherever we go next. It's all light.
It's mind-blowing, really. Do you subscribe to the law of attraction, that you kind of create your own reality? Or do you think that's... I suppose if you sat in drinking Vimto and you stick pictures of Lamborghinis on your wall, the likelihood it's not going to turn up on your drive, is it? Like, you know, but what's your thoughts on this?
Yeah, there's this book that came out in 2005 for The Secrets, and I had a really mixed feeling about it. It was the same year I started to do my training, and I thought, this is interesting, and also there was a voice that said crock of shit, and it's both. It's interesting and it's a crock of shit at the same time, because it depends on where you are in your development as a human being on your spiritual path. So if you've reached a point of spiritual development that you've sorted certain things out, and the next step is actually you're going to meet this gorgeous model and you're going to live in some Malibu house or whatever, then that might well happen. But for the people that doesn't happen to, it's because every single one of us, we've got this physical self, which includes my brain and what enables me to think and to feel. But there's also the higher self. The higher self is 75%. 75% of me you can't see. You can only see the 25%. So if the 25% want something really daft, and the higher self knows that the reason I came on earth was to be a shaman, I'm never going to go and live with that model in Malibu, because it would be a distraction and take me away from what I'm here to do. So if your soul's purpose is to be a comedian, and you want to do something that's going to take you away from that, you'll get the slapping and you'll be back doing a comedian.
I've never known what I wanted to do, Keith, and that's the truth. That
I've
never ever known what. I started out doing songwriting and music. I stumbled into comedy. I completely stumbled into comedy by accident. It was never planned. I initially stood on a stage to see how funny I was in front of strangers, because the old cliche at school, he was a clown. In places of work, when I had a job once, people said I was funny. So that's why. But I've never really known. I've stumbled into a podcast. I think I've been like a drunk, stumbling from lamppost to lamppost in my life. I've never really known what I wanted to do, kind of thing. So it's one of them things, isn't it? I don't know.
I think there's a gift in there, and I feel there's a teaching in there too, because I'll be honest with you and say that at the moment, that's where I'm at, because I feel that as soon as I try to get clear about something, that limits the possibilities.
Yeah.
So all I've got the sense of my near future is because I've spent so much time this year being censored and locked up.
Yeah.
There's no lockdown, there's lock up. I've been locked up for 4.5 months. I went to a different country. I lived an experience there with the masks, which was like being in the future in England. England's not like it yet, but give it so many weeks and months and it will probably end up like that. But it was horrific. So that was a bit of a not easy experience to deal with, and it's one of the most wonderful places in the world. So it's a place people think of as a paradise, and I saw the other side. I saw the enslavement. I saw how people have been literally subjected to 50-year dictatorship by the Spanish dictator. When the authorities tell them to jump, the only thing I can think of saying is how high. That's all there is, you know. So it's hard. And then after that, of course, there was the voluntary quarantine. So finally, the dance and the community and the cow yesterday and today here with you. So this is something I want to do, and it's introducing us something else. Can I shake your hand, please?
Yes, you can.
Thank you very much. That might be a good time to say on the part one.
Yeah, okay, then let's have a break now. Back in part two.
Back after the break.
Check out the adverts.
No freebies for you.
Hello, welcome back to part 2 of the podcast. I'm joined by the illustrious Mr. Keith Robinson, who incidentally makes the best chocolate did you like this chocolate, Colin?
Very much so.
No, he never likes anything. He doesn't like anybody. He likes his dog and his cat and his kids, and he just puts up with me. This is the best chocolate. Now you should be selling this chocolate. In fact, this chocolate, we'll put a link underneath, and anybody who's interested in buying chocolate off Keith, and we'll get you some business. Would you send chocolate to people for PayPal money and stuff? Anyway,
We might be able to work something out.
I'm not putting you on spot. I'm always telling people how to live their lives. And would you want a piece of chocolate? It's yours anyway.
Not a little bit, yeah.
Shouldn't do this really while I'm home. It's fucking good though. That's a talent on its own.
So that's my first gift to you, Jimmy, is your chocolate. I've got a bag. It is a little bag, which feels appropriate.
Thank you very much. Little is appreciated.
Yeah, just a bit of advertising there. So here's your first gift. So I'm going to give it to you, and you can open it, and then you can say, what is that? And then I'll tell you what it is.
Can I smoke it?
No.
It's
the label will be wrong, because I always have them from other jars, other bottles. I'm
not a clue. I'd like to make
I've stumped him from the word go. Isn't that good?
It's not parsley, is it?
I'll tell you what this is, folks. This is seaweed. It's seaweed.
Real seaweed.
This is seaweed I collected from the beach in Sidmouth.
Do you know what gutted me? When I went to the Chinese restaurant and
Yeah.
I ordered seaweed, it's not even real seaweed, it's boiled cabbage.
It's not even seaweed,
And
I'm sorry to say.
I was there at the Chinese buffet filling my plate with seaweed thinking I'm getting loads of iron and iodine and shit.
So so basically this is really good stuff. So what I would do with this is I get a certain amount of it and put it in a soup.
Okay.
So I've got a recipe on YouTube, simple shamanic soup. You'll see it up there, but
Let's give you a
put
channel.
a bit of seaweed in there.
What's your channel called on YouTube?
Right, okay, so my channel on YouTube is called UT Shaman. So capital U, capital T.
We'll put a link
Shaman.
underneath the video.
That's great.
What?
So I've got a film about how to make the chocolate, how to make raw chocolate, how to make bulletproof hot chocolate, and how to make simple shamanic soup, and a load of stuff, all sorts of different things. Almost any subject, omens, what's going on today with the world situation, it's all up there. So the seaweed is for nutrition. That's going to give you a boost with your iron, the iodine, all these things you mentioned. So that's the first gift.
Thank you.
So let's move on to the second gift. So
nobody's ever given me things before.
I want to declare that I really do find the idea of an
Rose-ips.
Yeah, well done. He spotted straight. He had no idea about
You
that.
throw them at
He
people's
spotted
windows.
this one immediately, and now you're going to tell me about misuse of roses. Windows are hilarious.
You
I've
never
got
did
an
that.
obsession. My obsession is collecting rose hips because this is the time of year to do it. So what I do is I'm going to give them to you, but what I do is I collect so many that I need to find a way to process them. So I put them into an oven on the lowest possible temperature, 50 degrees, and I leave them in the oven for about 2.5 days until they dry like little hard bullets. I then put them in the NutriBullet or a blender and smash them up into a powder. I've then got rosehip powder, which I used to make tea out of. So every morning I have rosehip tea with raw honey and a little bit of a very special plant medicine called cat's claw, which is really boosting the immune system. Here's a clue, everybody. We all want to be looking after our immune systems in the times we're living in today. Now, the thing about rosehips is they're free. They contain the best quality of vitamin C on the planet.
Really?
Because they mix with what we call bioflavonoids. The bioflavonoids are like the colours in the rosehips, and that means your body is able to take the vitamin C in completely. Whereas when you take the vitamin C tablet, most of it goes out the other end. So this will sort you out for the winter time. As for a simple thing, you can simply freeze them and just take a handful out, whack them in a blender, pour boiling water, add some raw honey. You've got a lovely morning drink.
Yeah, thank
So
you very
that's your
much,
second
Keith.
gift. So moving on, I thought we might get peckish at some point. So one of the things I like to do, I like to make flapjacks. So these are some
fucking
flapjacks that I made, and they contain all sorts of nice things: oats, hazelnuts.
Can I have a piece? Would you have a
dried
piece, Colin?
fruit.
Can you
Of course
pass you
you
a
can.
piece? I wash my hands.
They're not vegan. They do contain butter, and they contain honey and molasses. And I find if I'm in a tight spot, if I've got a few of those, I can keep myself going nicely. So that's for
Do you want to come and live at my house at Spur Room? I might
Well,
not
you never know. When we're doing travelling around the country, it looks like I'm going to be travelling more after having spent almost the whole of 2020 confined and contained in different locations. I'm enjoying, this is my first trip, so I'm off to the north of England, Ormskirk, now I'm here in Wigan, and I'll be going back down south tomorrow, but I'll be coming back again up north in about 2 weeks' time.
Really, yeah.
Meeting more friends and just finding out what happens when you have conversations with people.
We may have some orders for flapjacks and chocolate. You might be bringing a fucking HGV back with you full of
Well,
chocolate.
maybe that's for future taken care of. Now this one,
I'm sorry, Keith.
go on.
This is the best chocolate you've ever had. He's like Willy Wonka, but with that, his chocolate's better than... Isn't it good? Oh, he's laughing at it. I'm serious. I'm not even taking the piss. You won't get that. That's the best since they stopped doing old Jamaica rum in the 70s with the ship on.
I actually remember what you were talking about.
That I can't. That was. Oh yeah. I think the chocolate. It's only a bit stone. That is there so much in it like?
No, just
I feel
cacao.
a bit stone.
Cacao, honey, coconut oil.
I feel like dancing myself, but I won't do that now, Keith.
Bit of cinnamon.
I feel full of joy.
Good.
Yeah. Have you made it with joy?
Yeah, that's it. You're picking up on the joy.
You don't get that off a Twix, do you?
I love making chocolate because it's such a satisfying process. It literally takes me 20 minutes from beginning to end, from starting with the ingredients on the scales to actually putting it in the freezer. 20 minutes. So sometimes I say to myself, well, I can go down to Tesco's. Well, it'll take me 20 minutes standing in the queue, walking there, walking back. I could just make it myself. So I'm going to move you swiftly on to another subject because this is linking this in with something called the microbiome. And we've already had a little microbiome experience because when I shook Jimmy's hand, what I was doing, this is a bit of a big thing to take on. Be prepared to have some belief systems shattered. 3, 2, 1, you're in there. You probably think that as a human being you're made of cells. Well, actually, there's hundreds of billions of cells in your body, but what you might not realise is that the number of cells in your body, I better replay that for you, hundreds of billions. That's a tiny number compared with the number of microbes in and on your body. So the really important thing about being a human being, you need to socialise, you need to actually make physical contact with people, because then my microbes to his microbes to my microbes. What does that mean? It means I'm increasing my biodiversity. The more diverse an organism I am, the stronger my immune system. If I spend 4.5 months locked up on some regime, then I'm not touching anyone, I'm hardly seeing anyone, everyone's at a distance. What's happening is my microbiome diversity is actually becoming less.
That's why I keep my house dirty, Keith. Honestly, I'm not even a joke. If you live in a dirty house, you're more likely to have a better immune system than if you're somebody with running around with Dettol spray and everything every 5 minutes, aren't you?
You've brought the subject up, I'm going to go for it. During my 3-year training, Professor Hughes, he was a professor of the whole department, it was his turn to give a lecture. And he couldn't resist it, he had to say something, because there's all these student women sitting there in the lecture theatre, and it's obvious to anyone. This is a while ago, mind. They've all got spots.
Okay.
They've got spots. Now, the reason why they had spots, he enlightened us then and there. He said, look, I bet you women are using product on your face, aren't you? Physohex, that was a product that was used at that time. Now, that Physohex is rather like hand sanitizer. What they do is they kill the microbes on the body. So the hand sanitizer kills the microbes on the hand. The stuff that the women were putting on their faces kills the microbes on their faces. Now, if you kill the friendly microbes on any part of your body, this is open invitation, because it means that any microbes, including dodgy ones like fecal microbes, they could find their way into the body, because it's like a ploughed field. So you don't want to have a ploughed field. So I'll be honest with you, I have never used hand sanitizer.
No.
There have been times I've pretended to, but the vast majority of the time, now I'm in England, I walk straight past, because that is killing the microbes on my hand, which means I'm more likely to get hand infections, skin dermatitis, and you don't want to put it on your face because you get spots. So he was telling all these women, he said, look, Children roll around in mud. They
Yeah.
jump in muddy puddles. You actually need a certain amount of dirt. So actually what you were saying, spot on, completely correct. A little bit of dirt actually helps us to increase our microbiodiversity, and a cleanliness attitude. Okay, it's got its place in certain situations, in hospitals and maybe even in kitchens, but generally speaking, you want to actually mingle with a bit of real life.
If you drop your chips on the floor, eat them and stuff like that. Because dogs do it, don't they? But it's once again, it's increasing your
Dogs
micro.
are fascinating. Have you noticed how dogs lick people?
Yeah.
What do you think that's dogs doing?
I'm dead cynical, me. I don't think anything loves anything, so I think that it's saying I want some food.
No, that dog is increasing its microbiodiversity and its microbiome. Dogs are naturally instinctive beings, so I want to help you on that path, so I'm going to offer you this.
Thank you.
Now, be careful how you open it.
Is it blackstrap molasses or normal?
Nothing is what it says on the label with me. And
It's
did
not
you
molasses,
hear
is
that
it?
sound?
The shit,
No,
it's fuck.
careful.
It's beetroot, isn't it?
It's the fermentation process. What you've
Oh,
got
fuck.
there is you've got fermented vegetables. Do we need to take a break?
No, it's fine.
You're fine. Okay, right. Do you see the bubbles?
Right.
That tells you it's alive. That contains so many microbes that when you put that in your body, your microbes in your body think,
not joking.
party time, this is fantastic. We've got more microbes to play with. The immune system is becoming stronger.
So it's like there's beetroot in it and what else?
Well, let me tell you what it's called. It's called kimchi.
All
And
right.
kimchi comes from Korea.
Okay.
Now, the Koreans, if you ever bother to pay attention, folks, you'll discover something really interesting about Koreans. They've all got fantastic skin. They look really healthy in their skin, no matter what their weight is. And the reason why is when you get off the aeroplane in Korea, a friend of mine told me this a few months ago, the whole country stinks of this stuff. It's kimchi. They put it in their foods. They put it in their soups, in their rice, have this as a side dish, get it down you, eat it. It's so good for you.
Right.
But this is no ordinary kimchi.
Thank you very much, sir.
This is a very special kimchi because I made it myself, and I made it in I made it with. Let me explain. I made a whole batch in Tenerife, but when I came back to the
Okay.
UK, I brought one jar with me because that jar has got microbes from Tenerife from most unusual plants. For example, there's a fruit in Tenerife called a canistel.
Right.
It's such an unusual fruit that when you eat it, you think, what is it I'm eating? The point is the microbes in that fruit are in that kimchi.
Right.
Because I took a little bit of the stuff out of the jar that I brought with me and put it in the batch. So this has got microbes from the UK,
Thank you very much, Keith.
microbes from Tenerife, and it's full of vitality and health. And what that will do is that will increase your immune system, so whatever difficult circumstances you've got to deal with the next few months, you'll be stronger.
Thank you very much, Keith. I'm going to have some of that for my supper.
Now, what I would say to you folks is I've got a recipe called Make Your Own Kimchi. It's on Shaman on YouTube. So if you want to make this for yourself, all the information is there. We've got one more thing here. Last thing of all.
Nobody's ever treated me like this before.
Ah, well.
No woman's ever treated me like this. Not grooming me, Keith. I'm joking.
I'm not grooming it up.
I'm easily
This comes from my sister, right? This is blackberry jam.
Oh,
So I picked blackberries in Devon,
lovely.
and she took me blackberries out of the freezer because I thought I was going to be away for a lot longer than it actually was. And she turned it all into blackberry jam, so that you can have that with your
some
toast in
jam
the morning.
butties. Some spiritual jam
You
butties.
can have a spiritual jam butty with that.
Fair play.
Blackberry jam.
Thank you very much, Keith, for all these gifts and all that.
I'm done. The bag's empty, so we can move on to other subjects now.
You've no spiritual washing powder, have you? For I'm full of kimchi. But I'm just kidding. Yeah, I'm not giddy off this chocolate now, but we have to get serious in a minute. I'll tell you what, we'll have some questions off the floor.
Let's have some questions.
You know, and that'll lead us back into things. Really.
That will.
I'll just clean Colin's table because it'll be.
Why don't we?
It'll be a healthier table now. Mr. Darren Lewis, can you explain the entities that are met in shamanic rituals? Surely they must be real, as cultures all over the world experience similar beings. And what also? Oh, sorry, I'm not dyslexic, but sometimes. And what also like to know some plant-based medicine? It's Darren Lewis, this. I don't know what he wrote here. You're making a fool of me. It's what you wrote. But basically, let's answer the first part of his question about the entities that people encounter in shamanic rituals.
Yes.
Are they real because people encounter them all over the world?
Well, the thing about shamanism is that it's got a 40,000 year pedigree. So for 40,000 years, shamans have practiced in all cultures all over the world, whether it's Aborigines in Australia or native English people or Siberians or Central America. So you're absolutely right about that. And there seems to be a commonality of experience. And one of them is, and we talked about this a little bit, we just touched on it, because I talked about, well, there's the plants and the animals and the humans and the other beings. So this is where the other beings comes into the picture. So from a shamanic perspective, there are beings that do exist. And some of these are absolutely here to help us if we're willing to invite them to help us. So all shamanic practitioners, like all shamans, work with what we call guides. So I've got a number of guides. I've got 11 guides and I've got 4 helpers. Helpers are not the same as the guides. So the guides plus the helpers, 11 plus 4, 15, plus me, 16. So when I'm answering questions, it's not me, there's a team, a panel, and there's 16, and the one that wants to put their voice forward and the mouthpiece for. But I want to give you a particular take on it. From a shamanic perspective, these beings do exist. From a Western left hemisphere brain perspective, this is all the bollocks. And this is why I'd like to square the circle, because some people could quite rightly say to me, all these journeys and all these experiences and all these beings, could it simply be that you're making all that up within your own universe? And the answer to the question is, well, it could be. And the other answer is no, absolutely not. These are all beings all of their own right, and people all over the world have this experience. So it's you choose what you want to believe when it comes to these things. And I can understand both, because I had the rational scientific education for a long time in my life, and now I've got the shamanic perspective, so I can see things from both sides.
How do you get in touch with your guides or find out about them? What process do you do this by?
What you do is you come on a shamanic training, so I might as well say it. I offer shamanic training. I train people. I'm training someone at the moment. I was at an event yesterday where I finished training her back in March last year. The person that actually hosted the event, I finished training her a couple of years ago. So I've been doing this since 2011. I've trained well over 50 people now in different parts of the world, the Alps, the UK and America. So this is something that I do. And I'm willing to travel, and I'm also willing to receive people. And since about 4 years ago, I now offer an online training.
Okay.
So you can actually train to be a shaman. You can actually discover your guides, and you can do journeys, and you can learn how to heal people all online. And the person that is working with me at the moment, that's what she's doing. She's doing the online training.
Right.
And it's going great. She's about 4 or 5 months into it. So to answer your question, how do you get in contact with the guides? It's really simple. Somebody needs to be playing a drum, or you need to have a drum track on YouTube playing. And when that's going on, what you're doing is when you're learning, you want to lie down, because the shaman says, what do you want to stand on one leg for? Why don't you make it easier? Well, you can stand. Easier than that, sit. Easier than that, lie down. So you're in a relaxed state, the drumming is washing over you. And while that's happening, what you then do is you declare an intention. And the intention is, I journey to my safe place to meet my guide. I journey to my safe place to meet my guide. I journey to my safe place to meet my guide. You say it 3 times because you invoke the power of 3. And anyone who knows anything about magic knows that the power of 3 amplifies. So having declared your intention, you're just lying down there, the drumming track's washing over you. What you then do is you allow your active imagination to take over. And you feel yourself, your spirit, if you want to call it that, you imagine that your consciousness is either going up or going down. It doesn't matter which, you either go up or you go down. And you encounter what is your safe place. And you can describe that in great detail. And then you're in your safe place. You then, because you've declared the intention, a guide or guides will step forward. And then you have the opportunity to witness the guide. Sometimes that's as much as the person can cope with. If they're really up for it, they might even start to ask the guide a question, and then the guide can answer a question. And that is the beginning of your shamanic practice. From that moment onwards, your life will never be the same again, because suddenly, rather than all decisions being made by you as an individual, there are these beings who are actually dedicated to help you. Some of these guides appear in the form of animals, some appear in the form of plants, others appear as human beings. Some people have an ancestor like an auntie or a granny and they become a guide. Some people have a pet that's deceased. My partner has a deceased pet. He is her guide. You also get extraterrestrials taking the role of guides, and you take beings which don't have any shape or form, and they take on the role of guides. So from that moment onwards, it's like there's this group, so I'm part of the group, and it means I don't ever know what it is to be lonely anymore. So during all these months of being locked up, not being able to go anywhere, all that time,
You've had there's always been
got a relationship.
There is
nice.
there is a light that never goes out.
There's a light that never goes out. Good one. Next question or next part.
MAGA 2020. Hello, Toby. He's one of the regular people who subscribe to my channel.
Hi, Toby.
Now then, Keith said hello to you. Why is Salvia Divinorum used in shamanism? What is the desired result? Have you tried it? If so, where did you take it?
Okay, we're just always going for the deep stuff, aren't we? The year 2005, which just by coincidence happened to be the year that my wife died of cancer and the year I began my shamanic training, that was the year that I decided that I was guided,
Right.
I didn't understand this at the time, to devote the year to Salvia Divinorum. So over that year I had 5 experiences. That doesn't sound very many, but each experience was so profound and so deeply disturbing, and that's the best word I can use. For a person that's lived a normal life, or even a person that's lived a bit of an unusual life like me, when you take salvia properly, and I do need to emphasize it, you've got to do it properly, then what will happen is that the entire consensus reality that you're aware of, so this is me, this is the glass, this is the hand, this is the table, all that has gone bye-byes. None of that exists. And I was somewhere else. So I'm talking about the first one. And I see this shape, and it's shaped like that. It's an arch, level with an arch and level. And it was full of beings. They were multicoloured, they were full of life, they were sparkling. And I heard one of these beings say to the other one, looking at me, what's he doing here? Because actually what I'd just done is I'd entered the realm of what we call the form givers. Now everything that has form, like the tree, like the pea plant, like our physical bodies, like the dog, everything that has form, that form is created by beings, and that's what these beings do. They literally create everything that is.
Right.
So that's what they were busy doing. They were very active, very busy, and they recognised that I had intruded into their realm as a corporeal human being. There I was, sniffing around, having a look. So they made that remark to each other, and that was all they did. They then, having recognised it, they wanted me to know that I knew. They didn't want me to think that I didn't know what was going on. You know, they knew what was going on. So then I had the experience of being there. Now here's the thing about the Salvia experience. It lasts about 8 minutes. So you could say, well, what's the big deal? To do it properly, you need to do a pranayama breathing exercise. I will need to show it to you.
Okay.
Exhale completely. Inhale fully and deeply. Hold as long as you can. I would then hold for a long time. Exhale. Hold as long as you can. You do that for about 10 minutes. Then you get your bong out. You've got your salvia in there, and you spark it up, and you take 2 full lungfuls and you put it down, and it's 3, 2, 1. Everything that you've ever known since you were born has gone, and you're in this totally different realm. Wow. And so that experience is one that really sat with me. There's a deep paradox about this particular plant spirit, because its greatest gift is not what happens during those 8 minutes, it's what happens afterwards. So this is what I want to focus on. So one of the other times I was very lucky. I was in a geodesic dome in a camp in a field in Gloucestershire, one of the camps that I used to help run for 17 years. And it's an afternoon, no one's doing anything, we've all got time off, so I've had my salvia and I've had my experience, and I'm starting to be... So the first thing that happens when you start to come back, this is deeply disturbing for some people. When you're actually off on your journey, you can't think. It is impossible to think any thought. You can't even think, what's all this then? You can't do that because there is no thinking. It's gone. So after around about 8 minutes, the very first thing that will happen is the first thought will come. And the first thought that comes to anyone, if you think about this, is, I wonder how I get back, or how do I get back, or how on earth do I get back? So that happens. And then I remember my eyes, and I remember opening, I remember looking down, I remember looking at my right leg, and that whole chunk of the leg didn't exist.
Right.
There was no, that hadn't come back because everything was all the colours, the beings that I spoke about, the form givers. So, and then I looked down again and it came back. And then when my body was fully back, I then got myself up and I started touching the carpet in the dome. And I went outside and looked with my hands on the car. It was one of the most beautiful experiences because I knew I'm back.
Right.
This is what we're here for. We're here to be here. It's all very well and it's great to do these experiences. So someone did ask a question about DMT only today on my channel. It's like, I don't do that. But going back was a time, I've tried a lot of things which I don't do anymore. I haven't done that particular salvia since for the last 15 years. I haven't touched it. I had those experiences and it taught me what I needed to learn, and then I moved on.
It's an interesting point. I remember just before I went on taking ayahuasca with you, my friend Chris, who does the same for us, hello Chris, he's a very wise man, and he said to me, he said, a lot of the things you're searching for are already in you. And I need to talk about this because I always go on about this. It must be boring to people who's watched my live streams and that, but there's a film called The Silent Flute. I don't know if you've ever seen it.
Never even heard of it.
I'll cut it right now. And this warrior wants to find the Book of Enlightenment. So he undertakes all these tasks.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually he gets to the pagoda, top of it, with Christopher Lee in his robes.
Oh, yes.
And Christopher Lee says to the warrior, he says, are you sure you want to come in and look at the book? And he says, why wouldn't I? He goes, every year people come here to seek this knowledge, and what the answer is, it's not what they thought it would be. So it bustles in, and there's this old beautiful leather-bound book on the table, and it flicks the first page open, it's a mirror. Second page is a mirror.
It's a mirror. It's a mirror. They're all mirrors.
Every page is a mirror, and we're all going on these. A lot of people are kind of searching for the answers, what are kind of in themselves, and I want to. This leads me on to something within the space of spirituality and shamans. Like any other trade, there are cowboys, aren't there, and con men. You know, like when you go on YouTube, it's full of people in silky pajamas saying, like, you know what I mean, just send £300 to me PayPal, I'll, you know what I mean, I'll send you some magic berries, or, you know, and a lot of people when they're really searching for something, will go to any length.
They will. And you've brought the subject up, so I will mention it to you. There's a real issue about Peru. If you were interested in going to Peru and working with these medicines about 10 or 15 years ago, it was quite a good idea, but I don't particularly recommend it today because what happened in Peru is quite fascinating. All the old dudes and the old women who had all the knowledge of the shamanic practice and all the things that they knew about from their tribal wisdom, what was happening is the young people were coming up and they were seeing that there were radio, TV and phones, and they knew about YouTube and they knew about civilization. They wanted McDonald's, they wanted wristwatches, they wanted fancy clothes. So they abandoned and they ignored all their tribal elders. So at first the tribal elders sat around and thought, okay, well, we've got a bit of free time. But then what happened is a bunch of foreigners started coming from America and Europe, and they came to Peru and they started to ask questions of these people because they could speak Spanish and it all worked. And then what happened is these ancient shamans, the old shamans, the traditional people, they worked with all the foreigners and everything was going great. They did retreats. And you can imagine the young people in their early 20s, they're seeing this and thinking, we're missing a trick here, we could be earning a fortune.
Yeah.
And so they make a brew and they put something really toxic called datura into the brew, and people have experiences I wouldn't wish on anyone. And even my teacher got conned. He does retreats out in Peru, but even he got conned once, and he took something which nearly killed him.
Yeah.
So there's also instances of women being predated upon in ceremony. So it is right to say that there is a lot of cowboys out there, and you need to be careful. And what I advise anyone to do, if you ever want to work with any kind of a healer, just tune in, see how you feel. How do you feel about that person? What kind of an energy you're picking up? And if you've got anything that's doubtful, no, walk away. Walk
I
away.
was thinking that there is no kind of people you can go to glean advice. I mean, there's no like trip advisor, pardon the pun, for ayahuasca retreats and shamans over there, because you're at the mercy of whoever you get, aren't you?
Well, there is actually, and it's we don't talk about it that much, but Facebook has got all sorts of groups, and there's a lot of groups about these different plant medicines for each plant medicine, but particularly the one you keep talking about, and they've got thousands and thousands of people on there. So I won't say it's proper genuine information, but I will say a lot of people who go to retreats will post their stories, and you get to feeling after a while, well, that's a reliable one. I would certainly say if you were to go with Howard Charing in Peru, I can completely guarantee you're going to have the very best, most mindful experience. And do be careful, and do go for recommendations. And I don't recommend just going off and suck it and see.
No.
Listen to other people and get some ideas before you commit.
Very true, sir. Right, but I think we've got just a couple more questions.
Yeah.
I don't work things out. I'm not like Michael Parkins. I don't spend hours before preparing either. We just make this shit up as we go along.
Nothing wrong with that.
You can tell by my shirt. What is your understanding of DMT and what can be done while in that space when it's smoked? Have we covered that?
We haven't. No, that's a good one. So I'm particularly reminded of an experience, and it was outside in nature in Lancashire. And I can remember, first of all, I do the same breathing. I recommend the same breathing practice as I spoke about before. And you take a couple of inhalations in 1, 2, 3, and you're gone. And for me, there's two experiences. There's the eyes closed experience and the eyes open. I would say both are of great value. The eyes open experience is about, I'm sitting on the grass, and suddenly I realise the grass is infinitely more interesting than I ever knew it was. And I realise it's alive, and I can see these little tendrils reaching up to me, and I can go into that and have a fascinating experience just tuning into the nature and feeling part of nature, and nature and me, we're all one, and it's all the microbiome. So I can do that, and then when I close my eyes, there's all sorts of places you can go to, but one I particularly remember, it was like a long tunnel, and I kind of, my consciousness went down to the end of the long tunnel. I can see there was a portal, and I could see there was something beyond it, and I could have gone into it if I wanted to. But I've been doing a lot that weekend, so I was quite happy just to realise. So one of the things that DMT can do is it can literally present you a portal to other realms. It's also possible for beings to present themselves, and people can come across guides, but people can also come across what I would call malevolent energies. So one needs to be careful before doing such things, and I would say that set and setting is incredibly important. You do not want to do this at a party or at a festival. You want to have a good control about your situation. You want access to the outside and to nature, and you don't want to be subjected to heavy rain or wind, because that will make you feel really uncomfortable, and it will be awful. I once had the experience of a strong wind, won't ever do it again. And it's really an opportunity to have an experience outside of what is your norm. However, for those people who've worked with what Jimmy has spoken about before, people who've done a proper ceremony with their own medicine, if they then go on to work with DMT, they discover that they can actually use it as a healing tool in its own right. But if you haven't trained as a shaman, or you haven't done a retreat, that's very difficult to access that ability. So you need a bit of previous practice to do that.
Just ask you a question. When we did a retreat with you, you gave us all a shot of monatomic gold.
Yes.
But I've bought some of this off the internet and all that. What is the people said there's all the elites take monatomic gold. Could you tell us a bit about monatomic gold while we're on the subject?
Gold is such a fascinating thing because it's a noble metal. It's one that has value, and at the moment, if you have any savings at all, and if you've got your money in a fiat currency, that's really not good news, because they are all teetering towards the toilet bowl edge. You've got cryptocurrencies which are very fluctuating and variable, and I'm sure given time will prove to be solid, but at the moment the safest thing to put your money into is land or gold. So that's the obvious use. The less obvious use is you can heat the gold up to a very high temperature indeed, in which case it turns into a powder, or you can harvest gold from seawater. And I actually, all the almost, that's the name, it's called almost, all the almost that I provided for people as a free part of the retreat service, that was actually extracted from the seawater. Doesn't matter what form it is. So you're right, elites, nobilities and royalty have known that it's a precious metal, and it's for good reasons. And what it does is it seems that it has the power to activate our DNA. So our DNA is one of the miraculous molecules in our body that literally people with the brown medicine, they get to see the dragons and the snakes. That's becoming aware of the DNA inside themselves. That's really wonderful. And from the point of view, when you work with this, almost this monatomic gold, it activates your DNA and it literally switches you on. I had one experience with almost that was worth speaking about. I was on my own. I was in Accrington, I was in my bed, and I had the almost, felt like having some almost, had it. And I lay in bed, and I closed my eyes, and I did a completely unexpected, spontaneous journey. And I left the room, the Earth, the solar system, and the galaxy, and the void between the galaxies, and I left the universe completely. And I was in light. Everything was light, everything was white. That's what they call the source. And what I could see all around me was black dots. And I realised that each black dot was a universe. And I thought, this is kicking. And it only ever happened to me once. And I think this is the thing I want to point out. The experience with the 95 computer cards with the mushroom spirits, that only ever happened once. Because job done. So for me, job was done when I had that experience. And it made me aware of the fact that we are so much more than we think. Okay, there's a physical self, yes, then there's a higher self, which is a mystery to most of us, and that's what all our deepest motivations are coming from. And then there's the fact that we are emanations of the source. We all come from what people call the source, God, Allah, and all these names. We're all part of something miraculous.
So, but with monatomic gold, I've heard there's a bad side to it, that it can draw. And is that bullshit? Because when I was taking it, I was kind of worried that the people said, "Oh, be careful with it because you can draw negative entities into you." And is that bollocks?
I have no experience with that. I've never known anyone to have that happen to them. I have actually provided that to probably hundreds of people over the years. No one has ever said that.
Yeah.
I'm aware that one of the biggest issues we have at the moment is we've got the mainstream media. Now, I doubt if there's anyone listening to this that thinks that's a safe, trusted source. You've got the alternative media, and it's sad to say, but we all know that there's huge elements of the alternative media which also can't be trusted too. So as human beings, what I feel we need to do is to remember, you've got your own heart, you've got your own head, and you've got your own gut. These are the three centres of the human being. What does your head say? What does your heart say? And what does your gut say? And if your gut says run like fuck, you might want to get out of there. It might not be a good place to go. If your heart says yes, like the cacao spirit, yes, this is wonderful, I'm feeling community. So you want to tune in to your inner sources, your inner resources. And whenever you're watching something, whenever you're watching this or anything at all, see what it means to you.
Yeah.
And if it fits with you, okay. And if it doesn't, then that's okay too.
As Bruce Lee said, take what is useful to you, discard what isn't, and add what is essentially your own.
That's a perfect prescription, and it applies today, and it'll apply in 1,000 years' time, I wouldn't wonder.
One more question. Well, we've got two more, but the last question will lead us into an interesting point.
Yeah.
It's Rubber Dub. Hello, sir. Why has CBD got different properties from strain to strain in cannabis varieties when it is the same compound, and does THC have any medicinal properties?
Right, that's a lovely question. Thank you very much. I do appreciate that one, because I spent 10 years working with people with plant medicines, different parts of the world, and sorry, can you clue me into the question again?
Yeah, sorry, no problem. Why has CBD,
right, CBD, this is to do with the cannabis plant. So because I was working with retreats, I went along to the conference in Greenwich University. They have an entheogens conference. This means it's a plant medicines conference. That's all it's about. And they only have one every 2 years. I went in 2013 and I went in 2015. And I learned so much in there. And I remember this Israeli guy getting up and speaking. He'd been prescribing cannabis to people in Israel for more than 30 years. This guy blew my mind because I knew about THC and I knew about CBD, which is cannabinidol, and I knew there were certain other compounds too, but he then told us all, and we were all shocked, the cannabis plant contains over 1,000 active ingredients. And this is the answer to your question, because when they're saying they're providing you with CBD, they don't really mean that. What they really mean is they're providing you, well, first of all, they've chosen a plant which is going to be high in CBD and low in THC. But what about the other 1,000 plus active ingredients? Those not even mentioned. Those are going to vary from species to strain, whether it's indica, sativa strains, and which particular one it happens to be. So there's great variation in the quality. So what I would say is as follows. For serious illnesses like cancer and all the rest of it, there's no question that a lot of people are having a complete turnaround through working with CBD. I do know of people for whom it does not work, and I was very grateful for the Israeli doctor who said this. He said, we find about 10% of people, 10% of patients, cannabis doesn't work. Right. 90% it does and 10% it doesn't, and I think I know why. You remember I said my wife died of cancer in 2005? Yeah. Well, throughout her life, she was vehemently against cannabis and thought it was bad. Yeah. That was interesting. And it wasn't until a while after she passed that I heard about Rick Simpson and realised that that plant has actually got the capacity, the power to heal that person. But this is where we go into deep shamanism, because it's to do with the person's higher self. If the person's higher self has chosen to contract a life-threatening illness, that's always for a reason, and the reason is the person has got the choice to either change their ways, they need to make changes in their lifestyle, or it's time to say bye-bye to the physical body. And who are you, or who am I to say which is right and which is wrong? So this is why some people, nothing's going to work because they need to leave the body. Yeah. My wife, she needed to leave the body in 2005. It wasn't what her rational mind wanted, but in so many ways we were able to see, as the years went by, we had time to reflect and consider. It was the choice that she needed to make. So these plants can heal. THC is very powerfully healing. The majority of people with serious things like cancer tend to go for a full spectrum. They tend to have the CBD, and they tend to order from a foreign country, if they need to do so, the actual THC and all the other parts. So there's 1,000 active ingredients, plus the THC, plus the CBD. That's why it's such a miraculous plant, because it's so rich. It contains so much.
I gave my father, well, I convinced him eventually, my dad had stomach cancer, and I convinced him to get on cannabis oil. And he was sat there with a Richmond cig in his hand for saying, I'm not taking drugs. But my dad's mindset was, it's over. My dad had convinced himself, this is it, that's the end.
He chose it.
And I gave it to him, and then he turned angry on the cannabis oil, said, this is probably giving me more cancer, and you know that. But like a lot of it as well, it is the state of mind, and everything is the how you address life, and
it's your consciousness, it's your mind, it's your heart, and it's your gut. All of these things. If a person's walking around with a broken heart and they're in a terribly negative mindset, if they don't change their ways, then they will go where they're going. And if they're willing to change their ways, then anything is possible.
So the higher self, can you talk to and soul? I'm just interested in soul contracts and the higher self. I've heard people talk about soul contracts. So we kind of agree to the life we're going to be born into before we're here. Is that something like that?
It's an incredible process, and it takes us to the woman who was covered in broken glass. So the most recent film I put up is called The Woman Who's Covered in Broken Glass. I will opportunity to mention it. So she had to go back to the college because she forgot some papers, but she wasn't supposed to. She was supposed to drive home, but she forgot the paper, went back into the college, and while she was in the college, it was empty. It went boom, broken glass all over her body, her face and her eyes, and she spent a year in hospital. Now, there's a lot of strange things about this story, such as the first thing being that the day that she actually suffered this horrific injury, The hospital in question had taken delivery of a new technological device for removing broken glass from somebody's eyes. So she lucked out there straight away. She was put into a coma temporarily by the medical people, because when a person is very seriously ill, if you can switch their rational mind off and get them in a coma, they'll heal faster. And she was also in a coma for a longer period of time. Now, all the time she was in this coma, she was able to do all the things that we can't do, even things most shamans don't get to do. She got to meet the spirit of the person that planted the bomb, and she got to meet other beings in what's called the in-between worlds, and she got to be shown what contracts that she made before she got born. This is the soul contract you're talking about. So what tends to happen to us, and you might think about what's the word, people talk about soulmates.
Yeah.
On average, we have about 12 soulmates which are going to be really important in our lives. That's a rough rule of thumb figure. So in the in-between worlds, before you get born, you meet the spirits of all these beings that you're going to get physical and be human with and have interactions. So this woman said to this group of people, you know, sitting in the group, there they were in the in-between worlds, I urgently need help. I've got a problem. Every time I incarnate as a physical human being, I get distracted. I get into a relationship, I have children, I go to parties, I get drunk, I do this, I do that, I give a job, I watch films, and I never do what I came here to do. I screw up every single time. So I want someone to really put a bomb under me and wake me the hell up. Now this has got relevance to what's going on at the moment in the world picture. The world picture is that it's not business as usual. It's anything but. So this woman, way ahead of her time, it wasn't business as usual. So she asked for someone to do it. The guy stepped up with reluctance, says, I'll plant a bomb, I'll blow you up. They shook on it. Various other deals were made, we're not interested in them. So she's having all these experiences, all this is being explained to her over a period of months in a coma. So she has all the time to go, what is this, what you're talking about? That can't be right. She goes through all that and realises, okay, so this is really how it all is. So thank you for doing that, because actually if you didn't do that to me, I would have just fouled up this life like all the rest. So eventually, obviously she comes to, and if you're in a coma for that long, it takes you a long time to learn how to move your muscles, how to be able to pick up a cup, walk and all this. Eventually she's fully recovered, out of the hospital, discharged. She's got a burning ambition. And her burning ambition, as she does it, she creates a charity which is known throughout the world, and it's specifically to fund everything to do with people having horrific injuries. So if people have horrific injuries, a lot of people who get the help that they get, that's because of what her charity does. And she would never have stepped under that work. It's like me, if I hadn't been through all my experiences, particularly my wife dying in 2005, that was a really crucial one for me, because 2 weeks before she died, I was in the hospital with her, and I looked at her and she looked at me, and she asked me to come close, and I did, and she put her hand on my head, and then we looked into each other's eyes, and she said, when we met, you tried to save me, didn't you? And I said, yes, I did. And she said, it didn't work, did it? I said, no, it didn't. And that was the most perfect completion to our relationship, all the years of the things we went through. So soul contracts, talk about soul contracts, so part of my soul contract was to be with her, to go through all that. That was a stimulus I needed to say, yes, I'll be a shaman.
Yeah.
Otherwise I might have been distracted watching Netflix.
I think Colin's my soulmate, you know, I think he's part of my soul.
He may well be. Let me give you a definition of a soulmate. My wife was my soulmate, because the definition of a soulmate, that person, if they're your soulmate, they will kick your ass more than once. Basically, in that relationship, we spent 13 years kicking each other's behinds, and we grew and we evolved and we developed as people. We became deeply spiritual people because of all the work we did, all the arguments, all the barneys, all the tearing your hair out, and I can't stand you, and all that stuff. That was what forged us. It's like you get a piece of iron and you put it in the forge and you hammer it, don't you, with a big hammer.
Temper it.
And eventually it becomes so strong.
Yeah, so it's not like you meet somebody and they go, happily Mills and Boone, and you go out into the forest eating malt loaf or something.
Exactly. And that's a good one, because, I mean, it relates to the present situation. At the moment, people all over the world are being hammered, and it's painful.
Yeah.
And it's difficult, and all the things that people are being told to do are actually exactly the things that we don't need to do. They're actually the opposite. So if you're going to put something to kill the microbes on your hand, that's bad news. If you're going to put something in front of your face, what that's going to do is it's going to catch dead skin cells, bacteria, not viruses. They'll go straight through, and that will start to fester, and with your moist breath that will start to breed. So if you have to wear a mask for your job, change it every single day. If it's a cloth mask, make sure you wash it every single day. Have a whole load if you've got to do it. But don't just put them on and be cavalier about it, because you're risking your immune system, which means your health.
That leads us beautifully into the question here. I can bloody find it. Which are the ways an individual can garner themselves in a world of lockdown and a mask wearing?
You might not like my answer.
Keith, this is. I was going to say this is the Jimmy Orr show. That's wank.
No,
I'm sorry,
it
it
is
just come out because it's. I hate these people who talk in the third person. It's just. I'm sorry about that. I feel so ashamed.
It's your
sorry,
show.
Keith.
It's your show.
No, anyway, but so give us your answer, even whether we like it or not, please.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. It's what the plant medicine's taught me. It's what shamanism's taught me. It's what all my experience of life has taught me. It's all a game. Shakespeare said it, it's all a game. When you realise it's all a game, there's a lot of liberation there. First of all, you stop taking it so seriously. Second, you might start laughing when people tell jokes, if you realise it's all a game. Very, very helpful. But it goes deeper than that, because what you can then start to do is you can start to look at what's going on in the world. So if you go back about 50 years, people used to watch the BBC News. That was a common thing in England. You know, everyone's sitting watching the BBC News. People used to believe everything that was on it. It's amazing, isn't it? But they did. But as time has gone by, we now realise that there's still some people who think that, right? But when we realise life's a game, what we start to realise is that the games have been played on us for thousands of years. So the big games being played on us in terms of mind control and propaganda. So all the mainstream media is completely biased, and it's all promoting an agenda which is very deliberate as an end game in sight. Now, if you realise that life is a game, then you can start to see it like a chess game, and you can start to think to yourself, okay, so there's people out there who are so rich, and I'm going to make a little plea about this. If you order stuff on Amazon, slap that wrist, because you are giving more money to someone who is so rich. He's arguably the richest person on the planet.
And he's a cunt, sorry.
Now,
Keith.
if he's the richest person on the planet, do you think maybe the power might have gone to his head just a little bit? Could it be? Maybe. So you've got this situation that you've got these super rich people, and they're playing this game of chess. And they're playing chess with our lives. That's what they're doing. So at the moment they're doing this move. They've just moved that piece from there to there. And they're saying, well, what's all the great unwashed going to do about that? Well, they're going to do what we tell them. What are they going to do? And so this is what we're in. We're in this situation at the moment where things have been done to us. So for me personally, I've experienced being locked up. It's not locked down, it's locked up. I've experienced being pressurised to put a toxic chemical on my hand. I've been pressurised to wear a face covering. And in order to go and see my partner, I haven't had a chance to say any of this, but this has been a really exciting year for me. Okay, February 26th, my mum died. July the 18th, my partner's dad died. So when I was finally allowed to leave the country, on the first flight out of here to Tenerife, well, I was at the airport at 3 o'clock in the morning. It was one of those flights, right? I had a face mask on from the moment I set through, because in Bristol Airport you go through this giant marquee, and this giant marquee is so you put your face mask on and to put some crap on your hands. So I pretended to put crap on my hands. I put the face mask on. I spent 6 hours with the face mask on, waiting for the plane. How long do people wait for an aeroplane? A long time. The flight, a long time. Getting out of the airport, a long time. And the first thing I did when I got out of the airport, ripped it off my face, and I took in a deep lungful of air, and I realised I am actually completely up shit creek. And do you know, it took me 24 hours of hard work because I was ill, and I became from ill to being in perfect fitness and health because I did loads of breathing exercises and I spent time out in nature. I ate a load of good food and I gave my partner a big hug and she gave me a big hug and I was coming back to life. It was wonderful. So playing the game, it's up to each individual. In the UK, we're incredibly lucky. No one needs to wear a mask. I'm sorry, but that's how it is. If you look at the government guidelines, everyone has got a reason to say that they don't wear a mask, and it could be from anything from it makes me feel uncomfortable to it brings back symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder and it feels like I'm surrounded by a bunch of rapists, to whatever it might happen to me. Asthma, it could be a physical condition. My point is everyone has got the right in the UK to refuse to wear a mask, and most people don't even realise that. So since I have arrived, I have not worn a mask anywhere. No. The second I got out of the airport in Bristol, that's it, I'm now mask free. Yeah. And in all that time, I want to tell you, I've only been challenged once. Yeah. I've travelled from South Devon to Lancashire. No one said a dicky bird. The only time anyone said anything, I went into my baker, been in there for years. She gave me a whole bunch of attitude. So I spoke about the government guidelines, I spoke about the Disability Discrimination Act of 2010, and actually what she was doing, by even mentioning the subject, she was putting her boss in jeopardy of having to pay a £9,000 fine. It's nice to be aware of that. A £9,000 fine can be avoided if you don't challenge somebody wearing a mask if you're an employee. You know, respect your boss, so consider all these things. So we're playing a game, and it's up to you. If they move pawn to king wherever it is, what are you going to do about it? Are you going to respond with your pawn, or are you just going to cave in? Every choice is a choice. So the choice I made about the voluntary quarantine on arrival, I thought, I'll do it. I'll do the voluntary quarantine. I know when I've done the voluntary quarantine, I'm done, thank you very much.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a game. We literally are playing it piece by piece. So the question really is to do with meaning and how do we actually feel good about ourselves as human beings, isn't it? My personal thing, as you saw earlier, any chance I've got to make a physical contact with a human being, obviously you don't do it if they're going to be terrified. If someone's wearing a mask, leave them alone. You don't upset them any more than they're already upset. But if you recognise that you're with a human being and they're okay, just make a little contact. Say a kind word and immediately you start to feel better.
I hate this thing what's come when people offer you their elbow now.
If you go to Tenerife, I've never seen anyone doing it in England, but in Tenerife they're all at it. And the first time I saw someone doing it, I actually felt sick inside. I thought, ugh.
It's kind of like Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, the dystopian, the emotionless with no contact beings, just droids really kind of thing to do the bidding.
There's an end game. Anyone who's ever been interested in science fiction knows this. One of the things that's very special about me, apart from having worked in medical pathology and being a shamanic practitioner and being a health counsellor and having written a book called Sex Magic the Guide, there is something else I've done. And I've completely lost my thread again.
What the fuck was running? I was on about Aldous Huxley and the
sci-fi.
Dystopian sci-fi. Yeah.
I read my first sci-fi book when I was 8 years old. I went to the library. Everyone went to the library in those days. And I put this book, The Domes of Mars. I thought, oh, that looks interesting. From that moment, so from when I was 8 to when I was 18, I totally immersed myself in possible theoretical worlds that sci-fi writers had created. And in those days, the Russians were very prolific. I read some amazing Russian novels as well as novels from the UK and America and all the rest of it. And what that did is that broadened my horizons about what is possible. And I think that's really important. So in terms of where we are here today, what I can see is steps are being taken, and it's all to do with, let's see if we can get everyone into a state of complete control. And there's 5G, and there's obviously, there used to be things called vaccinations. The vaccinations were to actually help someone if they had a disease. So for example, if you went to a country full of smallpox, you'd have a vaccination against the smallpox. You didn't get smallpox. That's what vaccinations used to be about. But there are things that they want to give people today, and they're not vaccinations, they're cocktails of all sorts of things. And you can do your own research about the aborted human fetus cells and all the rest of it that's in there. So it's goodness knows what, all sorts of stuff. And it's in the pipeline. I read recently 380 million doses have already arrived in the UK to be distributed. Well, we're not even 380 million people in this country, so they've completely gone insane about the numbers. But also something that you might not have heard of, which is that there are so many ways they're going to be able to deliver this, and one of them is a sticking plaster. So all they're just sort of a plaster on it, but what you don't know is it's got micro needles in the plaster which only activate once you've had the thing put on. So for anyone who says, I'm scared of needles, you say, no problem, love, I've got just a thing for you. Just put this sticking plaster on. So the purpose of all this is to actually meddle with our DNA. And once the DNA is meddled with, it then puts us into a situation where people already are rather a lot. Let's be honest. Anyone who ever uses a device, and I'm as guilty of this as many people, you're trying to talk, let's start off, I'm on YouTube, we all do this. So we're all getting more and more connected to what we call the Matrix. If you think about the Matrix, the film The Matrix in 1999, absolute must-watch film if you haven't seen it. It's about people unplugging from the Matrix. Well, for the last 20 years, it's about people being plugged into the Matrix. So the more we're on social media, the more we're getting plugged in. But this is just child's play. Should the person choose to take whatever this thing, whether it's a plaster or whatever, it's going to be possible for them to be given the programming. I really fancy McDonald's now, or I really fancy this. So in other words, your thoughts won't be your own, your impulse and your feelings won't be your own, and that's all about total control society. So that's what the end game is. Let's have everyone in mindless bunch of drones, and it turns into sci-fi. I was a child watching sci-fi. I used to watch Doctor Who on a Saturday night. Yeah. Well, everyone knows about the Daleks. I bet most people have forgotten about the Robo-Men. The Robo-Men were human beings and they had devices attached
not
to
cyborg.
them.
No, what
No,
do they call them?
No, you're thinking about the Cybermen. That's different. This is the Robo-Men. The Robo-Men are before the Cybermen.
Okay.
The Robo-Men were normal human beings living their lives, and they went into this building and they came out with this thing on them.
Okay.
And they were exactly what is end game plan. So they've primed us all this for decades. That's the thing. None of it's new.
Yeah. Where does this leave us?
Good question. Where does it leave us?
Can I like this year has been very hard on me mentally, and I'd like to travel more. I've done a lot of things in my life, but I've not really travelled extensively. But the prospect of having to take the vaccine, or as some call it, the mark of the beast, to be able to trade, travel, and all that, it kind of terrifies me. In the prospect of not having it and being stuck there. But where do you think it leaves us? Do we take the vaccine? What do we do? What are we going to do? What do you think? It's a bit of a deep one for you to throw at you, Keith, but I just thought your opinion, really.
Because it's possibly the most important question, I'm tuning in. Let's see who wants to come through on this one. It comes back to what you spoke about earlier to do with the higher self, because just as much, everyone's got a higher self. Everyone is an emanation of the source. So here's the thing, God or the source or whatever is this incredible being, and this being wants to experience itself. And it realised the best way to experience itself would be to break lots of little lumps off, and that one's an ash tree, and that one's a squirrel, and that one's a human being, and that one's a member of the Illuminati death cult, or whatever it happens to be. And then they parade along life stage doing what they're doing. So your higher self has got some fundamental things going on. You've got a soul's purpose. Everyone's got a soul's purpose. I reckon you're living yours. I reckon I'm living mine. And I reckon you're living yours, actually. So we're here doing our thing. And a lot of the time we might not even know what it is, but we're doing our thing. And if we're on our right track, everything's going fine. But we're getting to this fundamental crunch point for the human race, whereby there has been this enslavement which has been going on for thousands and thousands of years. So the childless sexual satanic abuse isn't new. It's ancient. It's so ancient that if you go to, and I've done this, I've been to a sacred site in Wales with stones, and I've seen the women being sacrificed because I tuned in Shamanic journey. So this is what this one was used for. Right. So this is an ancient thing, but we're reaching a point as a human race where people like David Icke talk about human race, get up off your knees. Right, I'm going to shock you all now. It's appropriate. I need to shock people. Part of being a shaman.
Those were getting knob either.
So what I'm doing is I'm going to get down there and I'm going to give you all the Korean apology. But before I give you the Korean apology, I'll explain what I'm up to. Here's the thing. All these forces of what people might call repression or whatever, richest people in the world, all the rest of it, they've got all those agendas coming on. Now, you remember the story about the woman with the broken glass? She wouldn't wake up. She refused lifetime after lifetime. We are now being given, I won't say it's our final chance, but it's been our biggest chance so far because our backs are being steadily pushed further and further against the wall, and it's up to each individual. What are you going to do about it? And they used to say this after World War II, in the 50s and the 60s, the little kid sits on a dad's lap. What do you do in the war, Dad? What are you doing in this? Because this could be regarded to be a war on consciousness. It could be regarded to be a war on freedom. What are you going to do about it? So I know what I'm going to do about it. I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure that does not happen. And I want to talk about a couple of books. I wanted to mention good old Chris Thomas, a healer for more than 35 years. He wrote a book called Project Human Extinction, The Ultimate Conspiracy. If you're interested in that book, you're not going to get your hands on it because that's not available anymore. I'll also mention a book from the 1970s called Eternal Massage. That's also not available anymore. What Eternal Massage mentions is it says, in hard times, it is very tempting to think that the best thing to do is to go and hide away on a piece of land and just keep away from everyone and hope that it doesn't affect you. And I can understand why you might want to do that, but in these times, that's not a choice that I feel I can make. I feel I need to actually be in the world. So my feelings, each one is individual, be in the world, we're all doing what we can. We're having this conversation here because we're doing our little bit. That's what they used to say in World War II. Did you do your bit? Well, we're here doing our bit, and I'm sure you're going to do your bit too. Have conversation with your friends, talk about this, talk about that, and realise, oh, maybe I don't need to use that hand sanitizer after all. And actually, no, I'm not wearing a mask because I know it's the law. It's the law. But this is the big one. It's going to come to the point when we're all going to be confronted with what we do about it, and we're going to do whatever we choose to do. And fundamentally, what I want to say is this. It's an apology and it's a thank you. It's a thank you to the elite. It's a thank you to all the corrupt governments, and it's a thank you to the richest people in the world. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Because it takes this amount of severity to get us all to the point where we either wake up or we say, we're just happy to stay asleep. Exciting time.
And on that note, I think we'll wrap the podcast up. But Keith, you've been chocolatey, you've been amazing and dreaming. And let me give you a Wigan hug.
Oh, let's have a Wigan hug. Yeah, nice one, mate. Nice one.
Welcome to. I'm saying welcome. Check out all the links to Keith's stuff. If you want some of the best chocolate you've ever had, message us or message me. It's the best chocolate. He'll do 20 bags or ounces in the chocolate. Check out Shaman. He has training courses, videos and everything. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll give you Keith Robinson. Thank you very much and see you next week.
Thank you, Jimmy.
Bye-bye.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, sir.